Our guest, at least one of them, is here this morning. And we're getting into a conversation round about, human rights and the protection of them. But beyond that, looking into how we can actually make sure that moving forward, we're not dealing the cost of participating in the finance bill debate, the cost of citizen-led participation when it comes to governance. The executive director of Amnesty International is Irungu Houghton, and he's here with us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Joe, and thanks again for inviting me here. I'm actually the support guest, if there is such a word. We're all waiting for the guest.
You said it's support guest. It's like you make it sound like a support dog.
And no cause for alarm, by the way, because we are waiting for her. She's on our way.
Yeah. To celebrate.
Rose Njeri,
a wonderful person.
Indeed. Rose Njeri is software developer. You heard her the first time because of the work that she did to create information, knowledge, learning around the finance bill, and created a website. She got into a spot of trouble because of that. But it's interesting to see that many months later, she's been honored by the world in terms of the work that she did. So she'll join us in a bit. She's on her way here, and we'll get into a little bit of that conversation with Irungu before she does. Well, Irungu, as we normally do, we go to a different African country every week, as you know. And so as we get into this conversation, we're looking at proverbs from Togo this week, capital of Togo being Lomé, in the West African belt. And here is a little bit of what the Togolese say. A child does not laugh at the ugliness of its mother. A child does not laugh at the ugliness of its mother.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I'm sure for all the mothers out there, they're smiling at the moment. No, I think what I get from that really is this idea that, that which is ours, those people who we declare are ours, may err, they may make mistakes, but we have a duty to uplift them. And I think that's it's a very powerful message, not just for parents and their children and homes, for that matter, but all aspects of our lives, whether it be offices, whether it be the nation. That which is ours needs to be protected and uplifted. And you can't do that if you are running it down the whole time.
Indeed. You can't. Wow. Great to hear. And even as we just look at some of these things, dark is the word that it was used to describe a lot of situations that we've experienced in the last 1 or 2 years, especially when it then came to the upholding, or in some cases the abrogation of human rights and what people were or not allowed to do. And you're a rights man, you're right in the middle of it, and give us a bit of an overview of the situation from where you are. Of course, we're using Rose Njeri this morning as a point of contact because she's come out on the other end of it with a very different story, but there's some folks who those have been trampled on properly. Is it looking better, or are we still in the trenches?
Well, comparatively to June and July, I think as a nation, we're in a better space. June and July were probably the most violent protests that we had seen since possibly last year. And we lost, just to give an example, on Saba Day on July the 7th, 46 people were killed within just 6 hours, and they were largely shot or trampled or bludgeoned to death. And we still have a number of people who are being charged with prevention, with counter-terrorism charges, many of which, from the charge sheets that I've seen, will probably not withstand those charges. And therefore, what you will have is a number of people who are extremely angry that they have been treated like suspected Al-Shabaab, violent extremists. And they were essentially either, people who were non-violently protesting. These were people who perhaps were involved in arson. It's unclear until the court basically takes every single person through a charge sheet. But I suspect many of these charges will not be sustained in court, and therefore people will be released with, great bitterness. And I think we will have abused our own criminal justice system. So I still maintain, despite the efforts of the Director of Criminal Investigations and the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, that the protests of June and July were mishandled in many ways. So I think it's I think we're in a slightly better position. But I guess the issue remains, not just in terms of the actual violence that we see in the streets, but it's also about, whether there has been redress, whether there has been justice. Denzel Mondi's family still have no understanding of what led to their son being found in the bottom of a quarry. There are still several people who are disappearing. We have a number of unclaimed bodies, unidentified bodies at the Nairobi mortuary or the Nairobi funeral home. We have a number of cases still underway. Police officers still are not seeing the power of the criminal justice system. As we know, about 137 people were killed by police officers over the last year and a half, and the number of cases in court are so few.
No single prosecution so far.
We've not had a prosecution of protest-related violence cases. No, no. We have a number of ongoing cases.
Yeah.
The one to watch, I think, of course, is the case of Rex Masai, which initially started off as a very weak inquest and is now looking more likely that it will proceed to a full hearing.
But would you agree, or do you think that a lot of the manner in which we handle these cases comes from a place of a complete misunderstanding of what human rights are and how they should be handled?
Yeah, I mean, it is. I think it is the case, a misunderstanding, but in a deeper sense, it is I guess a refusal to follow the laws that we have currently. There has been an argument that we don't have enough laws to manage assembly. We don't have enough laws to manage public order, and I don't think that's true. I think it is very much the case that we have legal frameworks. The police have received training over the years on how to do, assembly management. I was in a very large, probably close to 2,000 people came out to call for an end to genocide in Gaza about 2 weeks ago. We were out in Uhuru Park, and 2,000 people came out. I liaised with the local police officers. There were motorbikes, there were children, there were vehicles. And to be honest, that whole day passed without, as far as I know, a single incident. Not an incident of theft, not an incident of mugging, not an incident of destruction of property. And what I came away with that day was just really a sense that when the police behave professionally, it is possible to have 2,000 Kenyans in Uhuru Park essentially expressing themselves on a global matter like Palestine, and we can all go home, including the police, with absolutely no use of tear gas, no sign of weapons, no sign of any violence whatsoever. It is possible.
So it is when the government of the day, or there is a bit of a political hue to the protest, that we have issues around human rights abuses.
Yeah, I think when the politicians get involved to control, the right to assembly, that's where the first step, the mishap happens, and that's where the disasters begin to develop. So, leaving the police to essentially receive the notices, to prepare 3 days in advance, to make sure that there is both, police officers liaising with the marshals, is the way to do it. I mean, we literally, walked from Ngong Road, from the Adams Arcade Mosque, right down to Uhuru Park. And as I say, there were children, there were families walking alongside, protesters. Well, they were protesters themselves.
Yeah.
But you have a multi-generational protest that actually does not end in tears.
Okay, so on August 26th, in line with this, now we saw what happened in the protest. The people who died, a lot of people aimed, and we've covered enough stories where we're following up with families, and you're talking to families who are still nursing injuries, and those whose lives have totally changed as a result of bullet wounds, and others are still in hospital. Others are still looking for their loved ones, like you said. So August then 26th, you and other persons appointed to the implementation panel for the compensation of victims. And there was a lot of stories around it within yourself being appointed, and also the LSK president rather, Faith, sorry. And you're looking at the number of days from August 26th up until now. It's like how many? almost 2 months.
We're fast approaching the third month.
What has happened so far as with regards with the implementation?
So the panel of experts was essentially set up as part of the NADCO agreement between ODM and UDA. And when I was approached, I was given the assurance that this was a genuine process, that this was a process that would assist for victims' families to be able to step past what usually is about an 8-year process of 5 to 6 years of going to court. The court, it's a criminal case, so therefore it's led by the state. A conviction takes place, and then for the next 2 years, you apply through a civil procedure for compensation. So most families that have successfully got a ruling from the court that they be compensated takes between 6 and 8 years, right? And those 6 to 8 years can be completely, challenged by all kinds of shenanigans. Forensic evidence disappearing, witnesses being intimidated, court cases being delayed, and so on. So this was an opportunity to cut through that and essentially allow the state to declare that it has wronged its citizens, that it has committed human rights abuses. And under international law, compensation is an admission of responsibility. Now, the online backlash, I think, since the announcement, since the swearing, has tended to confuse a couple of things. I think the first is that the idea that for you to get compensation, it has to be as a result of a judicial process. That is typically what has been happening in Kenya. So if you take the case of the Huruwino community who were poisoned with lead many years ago, they went to court, they were challenged, the process went through a very long-winded process, and as we speak now, we're going to the second decade for them to get compensated. They've even got a judicial order saying that they should be compensated, but the executive has failed to do so. So this was the opportunity, really, this was another opportunity to do this, but the thing that was very important for many of us was to make sure that the rights to judicial redress, which means that the families should be allowed, even if they receive compensation, to go to court and see who killed their child. Have that officer, that commanding officer, if it was part of an operation, essentially held accountable in a court of law. And those two processes, compensation and justice, would essentially happen parallel. That these don't need to happen in a linear way. So that was the promise, or that is the promise of the panel of experts. As you mentioned, we were announced. There was a flurry on X. People got extremely concerned.
People didn't want you. And also, the LSK president to be part of this.
Right. No, there was quite a bit of this. But I keep reminding people that Rex Masai doesn't have an X account. Right. I keep reminding people that Denzel Omondi's family are not on Twitter. So if you're coming from a victim-centered perspective, it is important to listen to public sentiment. But actually the main constituents that I listen to most, that guide me most, is essentially victims' families and survivors. The people you've described, the people who are languishing, still in hospital because they have life-threatening injuries, the people who are now looking for prosthetics so that they can continue doing their work, the people who have mental health trauma issues, the families that have been bankrupted by hospital bills. That's the constituency that I think we have to keep at the center of this conversation.
And if we cut through the noise, because you've been speaking to these families, you've interacted with a lot of these families, is it what they want when they're speaking to you?
We've heard a number of things from the victims' families. They do want compensation, and they do want justice. And they will not trade compensation for justice. They want both. Secondly, they want the violence to come to an end. They say there is no point I receiving 7, 6, 8 million shillings for my loved one, and then I open the newspaper and see another grieving parent, another grieving sibling. What they want is actually the violence to stop. So those three demands, I think, are very consistent. And I think the duty of the panel of experts and the state is to make sure that those three things are not traded against each other, but victims' families can declare that they can have all three.
My last question on this is, how then do you determine how much one family gets?
So unfortunately, the work of the panel, so the panel was sworn in on, I think it was September the 4th, and within 3 to 4 days, it was then stayed by a court order. So, and 2 of those days were weekends. So actually, the panel has not done any work.
Okay.
And this is the tragedy from the perspective of the victims' families. What they
Hard
have
month, but not a lot has been done.
I'm not saying not a lot. Nothing has been done.
Nothing has been done.
Yeah, because once a court says that it needs essentially to understand what's happening and whether it is a legal constitutional process, then everybody who believes in the rule of law has to stop for the court to determine that. It's funny enough, it is today that the ruling will be delivered. Okay. So we should know by the end of the day which way the panel of experts will go. The delay has been excruciating for victims' families. For those of us who had declared that we were willing to do this on a part-time basis, as we continue to protect Kenyans, including the Kenyans who are incarcerated at the moment, possibly in a military court in Kampala, that is Bob Jage and Neko Yor. We've declared that we were only going to be part of that process as expert advisories for a period of time, and we've already lost 3 months. So I think there is a question mark about the process. And as you've said, the Law Society members have been very tough on their president, and I think she has to think a little bit about what is the viability of this process. But I think ultimately we have to continue to say that, all roads must lead to justice and compensation for the people who have been killed over the last 2 years. But even more, as importantly as the people who've been killed over the last 2 years is the people who were killed back in 2017 during the post-election protest-related violence.
And that's what kind of sullies the cloth, isn't it? Because I think we can continue to have this conversation. Njeri will be with us in a bit, but this...
She's traveling from New York. or is it from Donholm?
New York and Nairobi.
We shall ask her.
We shall ask her where she's taking a bite of the Big Apple from. But, it touches on that as well, because everybody then is thrown into this pot, Irungu, and I think those are the questions that Kenyans... So the thing is that when you're met with backlash and vitriol from people, that it is coming from a place of genuine confusion or hurt or and maybe as far as distrust, that folks are saying, come on, if you're going to form a panel where you're going to say people should be compensated, how about you first say, you know what, we know that there were abuses, we know that there was an overhandedness in terms of the extension of power, and we acknowledge that. It does something. Even the rat knows that when it takes a bite out of someone's toe, it blows a little bit to, give some comfort before you bite again, kind of thing. So the question is, a human being to another, how then does that work? Njeri will tell you that the horror that she still has to live, knowing whether she's being watched or followed, if somebody will pick up her child one day to be able to get to her, she doesn't know. The mother who is still looking for her son is living through just as bad, if not worse, a horror. But it is the same character of horror that folks have to live through. So then how do you decide what is enough to compensate somebody who's living in constant fear or somebody who is living in constant grief? How do you do that?
I mean, as Amnesty International, we would argue that the way to do that is to fully comply with the laws of the Republic, whether it be the Constitution or the laws. I mean, it is the rule of law that separates us from a failed state, from a society that does not respect each other's dignity, each other's safety. So the rule of law is really critical, and in many of the cases, including the case of Rose Njeri, but let's wait for her to come and tell that story herself. We realized that actually laws were not being followed, and the use of mass surveillance, the use of military or paramilitary assets to essentially deal with protesters who are non-violent. I mean, this is the abuse that we've seen over the last couple of years, and it was a very dangerous moment for the country. I say it was, hoping that we are somewhat past this now. But I think the other thing that's critical, for us at a time like this is thinking through, how do we want to layer this society? In the next week or so, the Bildad Kagia, the play, will hit our screens or our stages at the Kenya National Theatre. And as I was thinking this weekend about his legacy as a post-colonial nationalist leader, also a socialist, somebody who believed in the vision of the Mau Mau and didn't let go of that vision just after, just because a Kenyan flag had gone up.
Yeah.
He really had it that it was critical that we created a society that worked for everybody. And that ultimately is what creates the environment within there is a sense of safety and dignity. So it's not just the criminal justice system. It's also about education. It's about health. It's about housing and making sure that all those basics that Kenyans need to be comfortable and to be able to progress are put in place. But not incarcerating, not intimidating people who are pointing out the areas in which those services are collapsing, and that's why I think Rose Njeri's story is so important for us to learn from.
And speaking about rule of law, because you started by that and briefly articulated instances around laws, for example, not being followed. Let's look at cross-border, because this is not just happening in Kenya. There is a very big concern that there is a way we are interconnected regionally, and there's sort of a feel that there's something brewing, and there is a lot of intolerance. And I'm going to refer to a letter dated 2nd October and signed by, it is actually from Amnesty Kenya website, and it is signed by you, Faith Odhiambo, President Law Society of Kenya, and Hussein Khalid, Executive Director of Vocal Africa. And this is addressed to Uganda, High Commission to Kenya, and it's an open letter on the abduction of Kenyan Bob Njagi and Nicholas Oyo. We all know what has happened. There is an account in that letter in terms of eyewitness accounts indicating how they were forcibly taken from a petrol station in Kireka, Kampala in broad daylight, then driven to an undisclosed location. Their mobile phones were immediately switched off and their whereabouts remain unknown. Is this the current status, or what's happening?
Unfortunately, we are now almost into the 6th or 7th day now. We're coming up to a week since Nick Oyor and also Bob Njagi were picked. And the latest we have essentially is that they may be being held in a military facility just on the outskirts of Kampala. This for us is, if true, is extremely shocking, because these are essentially civilians. There is no evidence from what we've heard that these folks were behaving in a violent manner. They were at a rally of one of the political opposition candidates, Bobby Wine. But there is no evidence that they somehow were threatening the stability or the security of the state. We are very happy to hear that we read the Ministry of Foreign Affairs response late last week, that they are looking into it under the Vienna Convention, and as their constitutional obligation to Kenyans, they have an obligation to continue to press the Kampala administration to make sure that our citizens are returned back. That is a Vienna Declaration bound obligation. Any state that operates under international human rights law has an obligation to reach out. And Bob and Nick have a right to consular access. And it is, as far as we know, that has not happened yet. They have not seen a consular official from the High Commission in Kampala to ascertain to their whereabouts. Ugandan law says that civilians need to be brought to court within 48 hours. We're way past that deadline. And therefore we must ask the question whether the Ugandan government is breaking its own laws by essentially indefinitely detaining 2 Kenyan citizens on their soil. But you've raised this point, I think, about whether this is becoming more of a trend in the region. And I think the sad answer to that is yes. Unfortunately, we saw the attempted kidnapping and abduction and forced return of Maria Sahai Sarungi from Kenya to Tanzania. We've seen the case of Agatha Atuhire and also Boniface Mwangi and the terrible injustice that they face. That's now before the East African Court of Justice. And we've seen, of course, the case of Kizza Besigye, who is now, looking unlikely not even to be able to participate in the upcoming elections because essentially he's being held on this charge. So I think we have to demand that Kenya retains its pride of place as a country that, first of all, is able to protect its own national sovereignty, and secondly, that it can protect Kenyans abroad.
Well, I mean, isn't that the question, though? Today, there's an article in the paper that talks about the disobedience of court orders, and this is just on basic things like, land tenure system. It's eviction from land. It's that you can't just go out and clandestinely shoot somebody just because you're wielding a weapon and you're a custodian of security. Right. You can't do that, but it's done. We have officials who are essentially the vanguards of state security who say things with wanton abandon. It's done, it's practiced. How can we demand something on a greater level where at the micro level we are not handling it? Can we come out and demand on a greater regional level when at the unit there's so many examples where the justice system, in many cases, as bad as it sounds, is just a suggestion. Somebody's going to say it in a court somewhere, but by the time it hits the air, it's evaporated. Right. How can we demand at a greater level, where at the micro level, we are not being bound or held?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think we have to recognize that globally the world is in a very precarious place in terms of the rule of law, constitutionalism, democracy, and human rights. I mean, anybody who's watching closely what's happening in the United States of America at the moment, where the president of the United States essentially says we are done with protecting, places like Somalia and Kenya against terrorism, not making the connection. Perhaps he doesn't remember that actually one of the biggest attacks on an American embassy took place here, and that actually what it was that led to the Prevention of Terrorism Act, what it led to the International Alliance Against Terrorism cells and militia, was an understanding that terrorism is highly mobile. Terrorist cells are highly mobile, and that you need to essentially interrupt them anywhere in the world that they are able to develop. Otherwise, they will essentially they will seize a state, and then you're dealing with state-based, forms of terrorism. I think the challenge, for many of us is actually how do you interact in those spaces? So it's the same conversation that, the citizens or the residents of Chicago, Illinois are having at the moment when they see ICE coming into their neighborhoods and grabbing, the guy that used to, cut the grass, the guy who was in the petrol station, the guy who was in the supermarket, the school teacher, the medical assistant, all the people that essentially that community respect and love are now being picked up and essentially put in these cages. And for Kenyans, if the live streaming of this is not a wake-up call, I think, I spent the weekend watching a movie called, Yet Another Battle, I think is the time. And it's on the, it's in the cinemas at the moment. And it's really a very powerful depiction of what happens when, a state goes rogue and it is left to citizens to rebuild a constitutional framework, a sense of constitutionalism. And I think, for Kenya, we also have that obligation. We have an obligation to rally when one of us is picked unlawfully, is intimidated, is hurt. We have an obligation to support organizations that are essentially supporting citizens to be able to respond. And also that we give courage to state officers that continue to remain, lawful. I mean, there are a lot of police officers who are very happy about what happened last year. There are a lot of state officers in the ministries who really want education to work. They want health to work. And I think one of the dangers is if, we continue to, to operate with the information only drawn from places like X and TikTok and various other social media platforms, then we tend to believe the disinformation and not really have a clear perspective of what it is that we need to keep this country on a constitutional framework. So I often tell people, don't withdraw from television, don't withdraw from the news. Just identify the news sources that matter for you.
But for a lot of people, it's the outrage that then comes as a result of what we're witnessing, and looks like the world as we see it, there's a bit of an isolation where each country then is looking inwardly,
right,
and trying to find their own solutions, and the high dependency of countries like ourselves, where then if it is military support, you're looking outside. So when it comes to your own budgeting, whatever it is you budget, you're anyway stealing it in the first place. So there's a lot of support that is expected then to come from outside, and it's then time to reflect and think, okay, do we then look at our healthcare system and how much do we budget into our healthcare system? How much do we then pay attention to what is going on within without expecting aid from outside? But circling this back to then this question of what we are seeing with these abductions and the outrage, and we are seeing this Occupy, I think the Uganda mission or something, and there is almost a sense that there is a lot of activism happening behind the scenes, but the fatigue is in how then you see the state reacting, the response that you'll see from the foreign missions, the reactions that we saw even with Boniface Mwangi when he was in Tanzania. And we were saying this happened in Tanzania. This is what their president said, openly in public. She was quoted giving reference to what is happening in Kenya, meaning she's aware, and these other countries are aware what's happening in our nation. They know our politics, and they know, well, we can get away with this because, after all, in their country, their president is also getting away with this. What is the looming picture if this continues? Because we're not seeing an end to this, and I'm seeing a chronology then of events from your letter, detailing from the months, the dates of different people who've actually been abducted, not just locally in Uganda, Tanzania, for example.
So for those of us, who are following this, the human rights organizations, my colleagues within Amnesty International, I think it's one thing to generate the timeline of what has happened, but sometimes we perhaps don't do a good enough job at explaining how a response to a particular context can actually save a life in another context. Just to give you an example, the mobilization that took place around Maria Tsehai Surungi not only saved her life potentially, but it also it's important to note that there hasn't been an attempt to try and abduct her again and to abduct other people. So I think the political cost essentially went up for the Tanzanian government and whoever else was involved in this cross-border transnational act of repression. The violence that we saw meted out on Boniface Mwangi and Agatha Atuhaire, and more importantly, the response that the two of them had, the courage that it had for them to come and tell that story, and the public uproar, not just in Kenya, but regionally and internationally, I think was partly responsible for the quick return of Mwabili Mwagodi several months later. Right? The anger that Kenyans had when 6 bloggers were arrested over Christmas 2024, Kibet Bull and others, Billy Mwangi, they were kept for 2 weeks incommunicado. They were tortured, they were intimidated, and some of them, even physically assaulted. That experience, when they came out and told their story, essentially made sure that Rose Njeri, who I do hope will still be able to join us, that Rose Njeri was kept in a police cell rather than an unclosed disclosure, and that she was brought to a court of law. So I think there is in my old days, when I was a bit younger and more academic, we used to use the word dialectics.
Okay.
Some of you out there will probably know dialectics. Dialectics is a great concept. What it means is that the relationship between push and pull, the relation between cause and effect, that when people citizens take action to protect the Constitution, then those people who try to abuse the Constitution have less space to operate. They have less opportunity to use public resources against the people.
Right.
And therefore, that's why it's so important that we continue to rise in every case, even if we feel a sense of fatigue, even if we feel a sense of fear. It is important that we respond, because what we do in that moment is we actually create the seeds of a nation that is able to protect itself against tyranny.
Okay. Well, I mean, and Rose is here. So, Rose, good morning to you.
Great.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Karibu sana, and thank you for being here. And even as you settle down just a bit, I mean, just coming back to you, Irungu, just really quickly, that does it require a change of heart, a change of mentality, change of psyche? Because unfortunately, what we do get with these court orders or these compensatory mechanisms is that we get you to, apologize and maybe do something about it. But that doesn't stop any kind of further action in the future. Yeah. So are we looking for a change of heart, or are we looking for, a top layer kind of activity?
No, we're looking for justice.
Right.
And justice does include compensation. For those families that have lost, family members, for those families whose, lives have changed in that moment, they demand compensation, but they are also demanding justice. They want to see criminal culpability. They want to see police officers convicted for shooting. And they definitely don't want a situation where police officers feel confident that they can shoot somebody today and know that the public taxes will be used to pay the people they have offended or the people they have violated, and then go and shoot people again. So I think it is all three. And it's important for Kenyans to understand that actually compensation must not be used as an excuse for justice. It must not be used for an excuse for non-recurrence.
Right.
We have to demand all three.
All three.
Let me not go further than that, because the lady of the hour is here.
Yeah. So, I mean, Rose, thank you for being here this morning. A few months ago when we spoke to you last, I remember that, you were still visibly tortured about things that happened to you. We'd like to get an update in terms of how you're doing now. But then also beyond that, there's some recognition that has come. We'll start with the tail end of that before we come back to how you're doing. But the world, literally the world, has taken 100 people and said, these are the folks that we're recognizing for impact, and you're on that list.
Yeah.
How mind-blowing is that?
It is. It really is. And I want it to be known that I don't think it's a me thing, but it's a Kenya thing. It's a recognition of where we are as a country, and it's a big deal that they're taking note of like what's happening and what we are doing, because at the end of the day, tyranny always requires some pushback. So I'm not taking it for granted. Yeah.
How did you receive the news, by the way? Because I'm just looking at it's a very big deal, and we are so excited and happy for you. When Time Magazine unveiled the 2025 Time 100 next list, so it's a global roll call then. And there are big figures that make a part of that list. You don't necessarily apply for it. But you, Rose Njeri, 35 years of age, you're a Kenyan software developer, digital activist. You find yourself among the top 100. How did you get the news?
So there's a writer at Time called Billy who got in touch with me around 2-3 weeks before it was announced, and told me I'm being considered for the nomination. So that's when I sort of looked it up, like what's this list about and how many Kenyans have been featured, and I was like, okay, I'm being considered. It's not confirmed, but so I didn't apply for it or anything. They reached out. I think they went through Amnesty, maybe because it's global, to ask, do you know her contacts, and then now got to me. And on that Tuesday when it was now confirmed, like, okay, you're actually on the list, I was mind blown. Yes. And then I was also looking at the other people on the list and just being like, I'm on the list with these names, So yeah.
What other names are there?
Okay, I am big on watching TV, so I know like Tramel, Tillman.
Wow.
I know the guy who acts as Money in The Good Place. I know some musicians. I saw she's called what? Glorilla, yes.
The hip hop.
Yeah. And then there's leaders. There's people. There's I think 3 other Africans on the list who are in leadership and in basically advocacy. And yeah, it's big hitters, heavy hitters, and I'm there. So.
Well, it's really, really good news. And just to quote you, you said, I never set out to be an activist. I was just a developer building my portfolio, but the government turned me into a civic tech activist. This moment is for all of us who believe in a better Kenya.
Yes. I think that quote is self-explanatory. I really just was building my portfolio. I was having ideas, especially after the 2024 protests and the abductions and the deaths. So I was moved to basically make tools that help us in any way to fight against the powers that are trying to suppress us in any way.
Okay.
Yes.
And while you were doing that, this is interesting because this recognition is not looking at the things that happened to you as a result of what you did, saying that you did it, and didn't take into consideration the atmosphere, didn't take into consideration a political climate, or perhaps they did take into consideration the political climate. And they said that despite that, in spite of all of that, you were still able to do that. Talk to us a little bit about where you are psychologically today, months after your arrest. It was interesting because Irungu mentioned earlier that, the things that other people had to pass through and the clamor around it ensured that you, for example, were not taken to an undisclosed location. You were then taken to a jail cell. You were taken to a court of law. Whereas, God forbid, we would have heard something else, like what we've heard from others, or about other people. So talk to us around what you're going through now, and how that may have changed over time. Like I said the last time, you were visibly still tortured when we spoke the last time. Has that changed?
First, I am very appreciative that there's others who've come before me. Like, I am very clear that I'm not the only one who's gone through this, and there's people who've gone through worse, including the person who was arrested right after me, which is Albert Ojwang. So where I'm at right now is just, I'm still a bit scared, but I do it afraid, because I know, for instance, even in that, I did a small gathering on Saturday, and I'm sure there was someone who was sent from DCI NIS. I don't know who, but there's someone there who you didn't know. Yes, and who I'm suspicious of, but you can't really state it out, and it happens in that way. Like, I'll be walking and there's someone following me, and you're not sure, but you can't really tell. And then, there's things like calls being monitored. And
how do you know your calls are being monitored?
Echoey, the same symptom behaviors that were happening before I was arrested. Echoey calls, funny texts. If I now switch off my phone, anyone who's around me now starts getting those. So there's still, I feel, some aspect of monitoring still going on.
Why would they still be monitoring you? Or is there any activity that you think that you're involved in that would require somebody to keep their eye on you?
There's nothing I'm doing that's like that. I'm just a developer.
Yeah.
At the moment, I'm just building more tools in the space of civic tech.
Yeah.
But I think for them, it's maybe they're trying to see who is funding me, or I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm really just doing this out of my own volition. So I feel like it's a waste of state resources
to keep following one Rose and Njeri. It's interesting that you say that, because people are already asking you. Sorry.
I was going to say, like she hasn't told the story. Some of us will still remember, it's only a few months ago, but she had 15 state officers come to arrest her. And I don't know whether we should get the camera just to focus
show
on her a little bit. 15 state officers arrested Rose Njeri.
Rose is like what, 5? 5
flat.
You're 5.
You're 5 flats.
5 feet tall, 5'0".
Compact.
Yes.
Very soft spoken,
Yeah.
looks very harmless. 15 state agents against you.
And Rose, no criminal record.
Yeah.
No criminal record.
No.
Mother of 2.
Yes.
Has always lived in the same house. Works from home. Would have observed a summons if it had been given.
For goodness sake.
But yet, 2:00 on an afternoon, as she's in a graduation ceremony, she's interrupted. I mean, I just wanted to make those points just so it's understood how much resources we are using
on one person who is not a threat.
Or we used on one person.
It's interesting that you talk about that you still continue your work in the civic tech space, because folks are already asking you this morning, would you please now develop another tool because we need a lot of information around voter education and registration. Folks are already asking you if you can do that, and so nobody's really scared about this other stuff because it's clear that it's needed.
Yeah, I'm actually working on something around elections, around voters
sensitization,
yes.
Voter education,
voter education, yes, and civic tech. I mean civic education, that is also explaining to people why they really should vote, that sort of thing. I am working on something, so watch out. Something's coming.
And so watch the space, including the folks who are watching the space.
Yes.
Essentially
watching the space.
Yeah.
And the space.
Hold on, Houghton.
I drank coffee this morning.
Well
I'm alive.
Well done. So you talk about the fear that is still existent, but still not fearful to be. Irungu always talks about citizen-centered governance, participation, and so that the fear is not enough, or the fear that you still may have, or the nervousness, the anxiety, is not enough to keep you away from the space whereby you say with your skill that there is something that you can do to impact the lives of Kenyans. No?
Yeah. Sorry,
it's not the fear. It's not too much fear. It's not so debilitating that it will stop you from doing this work that you talk about. You're still planning something else.
Yes. I'm again doing it afraid. Yes. I feel like someone has to do it, and for me, my fear is not based on theory. It's like something I've been through.
Right.
It's a real thing for me that I was arrested for making a tool, and I basically stand here saying I didn't despair, didn't give up, and I'm still working on other tools that are supposed to help the government of the day at the end of the day. So yeah, doing it afraid, but still doing it.
Any regrets?
No, because I didn't do anything wrong, so.
Now, looking back, before the arrests, nobody knew who Rose Njeri was.
Yes.
Well, apart from your family, your friends, and people within your space. Then all of a sudden, you come to this limelight, in the spotlight. Everybody now knows you. You're being recognized globally. You didn't ask for this, like you said. You're just doing your job, and you're calling for all Kenyans to be good citizens, everybody to do their bit. Looking back, is there anything that you would have done differently, or anything that you would have changed when you journey this far?
Maybe because it would have been hard if there was anything I would have done, because usually when you're just a random person, it would be hard to maybe approach like some big organization and be like, I think I'm being followed, So I don't know. If I could have maybe had these people on my side before, maybe even the state would have been afraid to come for me, because there's people around me. But I was just doing it solo, so it's easier for them to net me in that situation. Yeah.
And the assumption would be that the only way then of projecting that this is what we want as a better country is going through the streets. You are sitting behind a computer. And what essentially then you're saying is for every person, Houghton is here doing a great, fantastic job in his space.
Yeah.
You are in a different space. There's somebody else. Bomjagi is in Uganda. Everybody is playing different roles. In your opinion, Do you see all this culminating into, for lack of a better word, a movement that then will bring about change?
Yes, absolutely. And it's absolutely necessary for everyone in your small station in life, whatever you're doing, to be conscious about what's happening and actually doing something that helps move the country forward. So even these small things like giving bribes, not just taking them, if we are able to just play your small parts, littering, instead of throwing things, tembea na takataka mpaka upate dustbin. Those small things eventually add up to something. All of us can do something. Yes.
I was just trying to look at the list because the people are asking, okay, so who else is in that list? You mentioned Glorilla, who's, I didn't even know who that is. I don't know how Houghton knows this person.
I'm a Gen Z at heart. Mambo ya hip hop.
Gen Z at heart.
Get the clean version.
So among the people in that list, I mean, Spanish soccer phenomenon, Lamine Yamal, who plays for, I think, Barcelona.
Yes,
I don't watch a lot of football. Is part of that list, together with some very, very serious leaders and people within that tech space. What does this give you that motivation to is this giving you motivation and sort of like that affirmation that you're actually doing the right thing? Because I know there are times probably you will be doubting, am I really supposed to be doing, is this like my call? Am I supposed to be doing this? Why should I care? I'm only one person. I'm a mother of two, right?
Yes.
Mother of two. Why should I care about the future of this country? It's too big for my small space.
Yes.
But does this give you that motivation? Like, okay, this then means that there's something you're doing right. And if then you're getting also followed, it means actually there's something that concerns the people around, meaning that you're doing something right.
Yes,
Is
it
this
does.
giving you that?
It does affirm that what I'm doing is right, and also vindicates me, because there's that feeling of, okay, maybe what I did wasn't, but when it gets this recognition, and you know that whatever I know that whatever I did was rooted in honesty, in justice, and it being recognized as such, does give me motivation to keep going. Because I still, as I said, I still have been working on other tools, but I think there's still that fear. So when now this recognition comes, it's like, okay, I can actually do this and make a difference in my own way. In the same way Wangari Maathai said, even a hummingbird does a small contribution, whatever. I don't remember the quote, I'm so sorry, but every little thing you do counts.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I mean, that's it. Really. Not more to add to that, because it's clear. And you know what? It sounds horrible to say, but everybody's watching you, literally, because folks want to see the next thing that's coming, and like you said, it's coming, and so everybody can do something. And I think that's a great way to then be able to close this conversation, because we can all do something at whatever level. And we thank you for what you do, and we wish you the protection and the best that you need going forward. Rose Njeri, software developer, and Irungu Houghton, we can't say enough. Asante
Rose
sana.
Njeri fan.
Rose Njeri fan.
That's my status today.
That's your status today.
Fan of Rose Njeri.
Okay. Executive Director of Amnesty International, Irungu Houghton, also joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Great way to start off the conversations for the day. Asante sana.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.